I just want to start by just sharing that the Missouri House just passed the largest sales tax increase in our state's history, and it will be headed to a ballot for Missourians to vote on either in August or November of this year. I think that the headlines from today are that the Missouri GOP continues to push this idea that their entire plan here is to eliminate sales tax when sorry, to eliminate income tax. I think that what folks really need to pay attention to is that there is no universe in which we eliminate the income tax without drastically increasing sales taxes on every single Missourian. That means 80% of Missourians are going to end up paying more than they already do into the tax system here in Missouri. It's been a deeply frustrating process from start to finish, from the governor announcing that he would only support this if it had exemptions. We see no exemptions in this language that passed today, and this is going to be put in front of the voters now, and I look forward to voters soundly rejecting this when it hits their ballot. Happy to take questions. Representative Fogel, did you?
Leader Aune, what does that actually entail now? I know you said out on the floor that you're happy to campaign on this measure and show people what this means. How do you convince voters in your perspective that this is more of a tax swap than a tax cut?
Well, I will say that we have been talking about this for months now. We've been talking to our voters. We've been talking to Republican voters. We've been talking to folks all across the state about what is actually in this plan. And it seems to me that voters are paying attention. They understand that this is a sales tax hike. They also understand that the Republican Party does not need to put an elimination of the income tax in front of voters. Voters don't need to approve eliminating their income tax, but they do need to approve increasing their sales tax, which is exactly what the Missouri GOP is asking voters to do.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Well, there'd be a question for Representative Fogel. If you could illustrate how much would sales taxes have to increase to actually be able to eliminate that income tax, and what would the financial burden be like for the average Missourian?
Yeah, so each percent increase in the sales tax generates about $1 billion of economic activity for the state. The concern with this language, of course, is that the bill sponsor and no one in this building has been able to provide us a tangible path of how we would offset the revenue reductions. The language of the bill says that the General Assembly shall eliminate the income tax. If the General Assembly does that, we know that's roughly an $8.5 billion reduction to state revenues. Equally concerning, if not more concerning, would be the Republican members today who shared that this is going to be a revenue neutral proposal. The governor himself has said he would support and only would support a revenue neutral proposal. If you're reducing $8.5 billion of taxation and shifting that burden to who's paying it, as was noted today, concerns of members of both sides of the aisle, veterans, retirees, individuals with disabilities who aren't paying the income tax, who will receive no benefit of this, but all of the negatives. It's very concerning. I think that's why you saw bipartisan opposition to the bill passing out of both the Senate and the House. Nobody wants the cost of living to go up, and this bill would do that for most of my constituents back home.
Leader Aune, I know you've expressed frustrations before about some Democrats in the Senate not really doing anything in that chamber to stop it, but have there been conversations among Democratic leaders down here that maybe this needed to pass to get sent to voters?
Well, I would like to clarify that, my concern was that the impression of how the Senate Democrats handled negotiations looked as if they were not doing enough. What I will say to that is negotiations that happen in the Senate look a lot different than negotiations that happen in the House, and I do not pretend to know what happens in those negotiations behind closed doors. My concern is that we have been opposing this for so long, so loudly. And, the Democrats on both sides of the chamber, yes, we are absolutely talking. And, I think that there's a lot of mixed concerns. You're going to hear people from my side of the aisle even who will argue that right now it's very frustrating to be a Democrat in the state, where we see folks going to the ballot box over and over again, voting for progressive policies and continuing to reelect a Republican supermajority. And so, there is a lot of talk on our side of the aisle about whether or not, really tying these issues to the candidates who support them, if that is the best way to make a dent in the Republican supermajority, to end the Republican supermajority, and to make sure voters understand that when you vote for a Democrat, you're voting to uphold their will down here in the State House, rather than voting for someone who's going to come down and do the exact opposite of what they just voted on.
Something you said reminded me of this, but a complaint I keep hearing from people is, oh, we're voting on this, but they don't always listen to what we vote, tying back to abortion and paid sick leave. Is there any way for Republicans to still go about raising sales taxes, swapping the income tax, if this measure does not pass for the vote?
If this measure fails at the ballot box, the Republicans do not have a mechanism to increase sales taxes, but they absolutely can remove the income tax statutorily. They could do that here in this building this session right now if they wanted to, without voter approval. So, you know, I would guess that if this fails at the ballot, they're going to try to take another bite at the apple. I think they'll try again, probably in a different way. But that's sort of what they want to do in this building. If the voters tell them one thing, they try to do the exact opposite.
On the other hand, if it passes, is there any guarantee that the income tax will be eliminated?
Yes. So the language in the bill says that the income tax shall be eliminated. It says the sales tax may be increased to offset that. And I think that that's another concern that we should all have, because when you think about what this does, is it does bind a future General Assembly. What we'll see happen is a future General Assembly is going to see dwindling revenues and be forced to make a decision. How do we offset that? I look around this room at a Republican supermajority and I think, which members in this room are actually going to vote for a sales tax increase? Who's going to do that? Who's going to take that vote? They're all too afraid to even vote against this bill, let alone take a vote that will explicitly increase taxes for their constituents. I can't see a situation where that happens, and it really worries me that a future General Assembly is going to be really hamstrung in the budget process.
Representative Fogel, this might be a question for you then, because I believe the language in it sets it up proportionally, where they've got to raise or match revenue, I think it's from last fiscal year, in order to eliminate the income tax. So if they don't vote to raise sales taxes, how can they get rid of the income tax? And then if they still do and don't have the sales tax revenue, what happens?
The General Assembly, as was mentioned, already has complete authority to eliminate the income tax as quickly or as rapidly as they see fit. What this resolution does is give the General Assembly authority to increase the sales tax and increase the use tax, including taxation on real estate, to whatever they see fit for 5 years, with the purpose of offsetting the income tax. So as Rep. Ani mentioned, the parts of the bill that most of the Republicans got up and spoke in favor of, those in my mind are null and void. They can already do that. The parts of this that are concerning to us is it mandates that we do completely eliminate the income tax, which of course has budgetary concerns. But more importantly for me is shifting the burden of who's paying that $8.5 billion to the backs of working families, retirees, individuals with disabilities, and people who are living paycheck to paycheck.
But could we see a gap there in state funding then, if they're not raising sales taxes proportionally?
We absolutely could. And you guys have been here with us. We have had very difficult conversations about the fiscal reality of our state. Saw some significant cuts, and we're going to see significant cuts to the budget in years moving forward. Most importantly, what those budget cuts look like are less dollars in kids in classrooms, less services for individuals with disabilities, less services to important basic vital services that state government is intended to provide. I have a real concern that now we have a resolution in front of us that mandates we completely eliminate the income tax, and no guarantee that any member of this General Assembly would support a use tax or an increase of sales tax. But equally concerning, if they do, who's going to be responsible for paying for those vital services?
One of the things that was never added into any of the versions of this bill were the limitations as to what can be expanded. Obviously, Governor Kehoe asked for very specific restraints placed on any potential sales tax expansion. I've spoken with a couple of GOP legislators that voted against the bill, and they said that in the future, if they win their reelection, they would not, obviously they want to protect the things in their constituency. So what does the lack of those restrictions or of the potential expansions, what does it say to you about how effective this may be going forward?
Yeah, the governor in his State of the State this year promised that he would never support tax increases or sales tax increases for agricultural, real estate, and healthcare. The bill that moved out, or the resolution that moved out today, includes none of those exemptions, which to me, it's complex, of course, multiple concerns there. One of which is, if the governor is saying and is a man of his word and upholds that, that means any piece of legislation that doesn't have those carve-outs will be vetoed by the governor. I would expect that. He made that promise to people in his State of the State. That would mean that sales tax for everything else would have to go up even higher to offset the reductions to the income tax. Again, I can't speak to what the plan is because it was not laid out by the bill sponsor. None of us are guaranteed to be back next year. We have a record number of contested House races. The people who are making promises won't be here in subsequent years to make good on those promises. This gives blanket authority for 5 years. The governor himself might not be in that office. There's a lot of uncertainty, and I'm just not willing to gamble a cost of living increase for a majority of my constituents. And I think my caucus and some Republicans today felt the same way.
I spoke with the speaker, and he said that having this on the ballot may potentially actually be a boon to Republicans in November. Do you think that this will be a boon to your party?
I think that this will be a huge gift to Democrats if it's on the November ballot. Frankly, I think it'll be a huge gift to us if it's on the August ballot. The fact of the matter is that the Democrats' messaging on this is winning. And to be clear, it's also not just the Democrats' messaging. It's conservative grassroots as well. It has been really fascinating to watch the opposition to this grow and grow and grow. But my belief is that voters absolutely understand that not only is this going to be incredibly detrimental to their pocketbooks, but they also understand that it's the Missouri GOP pushing this agenda. I believe that they will reject it, and my hope is that we do the work between now and then to make sure that they also reject the Republicans who have voted for it.
This might have been talked about before I got in, so I apologize if this is repeating. So last week, you had talked a little bit about Senate Democrats sitting down, not standing up and blocking this as long as you anticipated, perhaps. Did you anticipate you'd actually kind of be aligned with Joe Nicola, State Senator Joe Nicola, on this? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. One of the most interesting things about working in this building as a legislator is the strange bedfellows we make along the way. And I can't tell you how often Democrats look across the aisle and find common purpose with our Republican colleagues. Oftentimes that looks like aligning with members of the Freedom Caucus or the Conservative Caucus, because sometimes we just go so far around our circles we meet up again, right? And it's always I always welcome Republicans in the fight. I always welcome a bipartisan opposition to some of the worst ideas that we see here, and I'm always happy to stand with a fellow legislator, regardless of what side of the aisle they're on, if we're working towards the best policy for Missourians. Anything else?
Thanks, guys.
All right, thanks so much.
Very much.